Welcome to episode 46.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
It's a new year, and if you're like me, you are already thinking about warmer weather and taking that getaway to that tropical or exotic destination. Maybe you plan to travel to Walt Disney World or Universal Studios. No matter what kind of trip you plan, 3D Travel Company is the company for you. Just visit 3dtravelcompany.com and let them know that Trenton sent you from Who Did That Voice. Or you can book on www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Book today and travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest hails all the way from the second star to the right and straight on till morning. All the way from Neverland, it's Peter Pan.
Hey, Jane. How come you want to go home so bad?
I told my little brother you weren't real.
What? Why?
Well, I don't know. But I have to get back and set things right.
Why?
Because! That's why!
Well, you know, the only way out of here is to fly. Come on, I'll show you how. Shh. Wendy, you changed.
Not really. Not ever.
Goodbye, Wendy.
Goodbye, Peter.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice? Today on the show we have Blayne Weaver joining us today. Blayne, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You know, Blayne, the very first thing we always like to do when we start out with a special guest is just to get a little background on who they are and how did you get into acting and more specifically voice acting?
Well, it's a long, winding road. I grew up in Bossier City, Louisiana, and as a kid, I did lots of theater. I actually did children's theater with this company called the Peter Pan Players. So Peter Pan has always been a big part of my existence. But when I was about 16, I started driving to Dallas, Texas, and auditioning for acting work, and I ended up booking a couple of TV movies out of there, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and I did TV and commercials, and I went to my agent's office one day, and I was basically just showing my face and trying to remind her that I'm alive, and like, hey, I haven't had a lot of auditions this week, or this month, rather.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, she just looked on her desk. It was covered with papers, and she grabbed the closest one and said, here, why don't you go down the hallway and audition for this? And the voiceover division was auditioning for Peter Pan Return to Neverland.
Oh, wow.
They were doing voice matches for all of the characters in the original 1950s Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And in that, Cubby, one of the Lost Boys, was played by a grown man and had kind of like a goofy kind of voice, And so she's like, you can play this. I was like 22 at the time. So I went down and, met the voiceover guys and started to audition for Cubby, and I just felt totally self-conscious and silly, and I'm like, I can't really do a voice like this, but I can do a kid's voice.
Yeah.
Can I just try out for Peter? Like, I had always thought that Peter sounded a lot like Wally Cleaver to me.
Yeah.
So I kind of did a little, Wally Cleaver impression, and 6 months later, I got a call from the agent asking if I was represented by this particular agency, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in the theatrical department. And the voiceover agent was like, we've been looking for you for months. You auditioned here, and nobody knew who you were. So it was just a lot of luck happened for me to land that job, and I went and recorded Return to Neverland with the full cast, and they kept calling me back, and I kind of Disney's kind of funny in that most of its voiceover talent isn't under contract, so
Yeah.
they kind of reserve the right to change up at any point. So I kept thinking that like this was never going to come out with my voice in it. Like they were going to hire Michael J. Fox at the last minute and get somebody famous in there. And I didn't even know that it was going to be me until I saw the trailer for it.
Oh,
And
wow.
ever since then, every time Peter Pan is needed, Disney calls me, and I get to fly in and do some crowing and some swashbuckling, and it's like it's the greatest job ever.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Peter Pan is the embodiment of, staying young forever and keeping your childlike self inside alive. And Peter's always been one of my absolute favorites. I absolutely love the original Peter Pan. And I was so glad that Disney did Return to Neverland. And just to be able to speak with you today is super awesome, Blayne. Reliving my childhood, Peter Pan is that embodiment of, thinking back to yesteryear and the days of, less responsibilities and fun times. And,
I'm with you.
so.
I feel the exact same way. And like, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it because it's really cool because it's a job that's bigger than any of its parts. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's way bigger than me. It's like, I feel like when I get to do Peter, that I'm part of people's childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm part of this big, Disney experience. And, Peter was always my favorite. And I just hope that I'm doing some kind of justice to the character so that, kids now can have the same adoration for that character that I did.
Oh, absolutely. And, like my wife and I, we went to Walt Disney World in April of 2015 for our honeymoon, and we rode the Peter Pan ride. Excuse me. We rode the Peter Pan ride because that is one of my absolute favorite rides of all times there. So
That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, he's just a great character that I feel like means so much to so many people.
And, speaking of Peter Pan and being able to do so much for Disney, just a few of the different iterations that you have done have been for Mickey's PhilharMagic, the ride show, where it's kind of an interactive 3D show. And as well, you did we mentioned Return to Neverland back in 2002. And in 2011, you were Peter Pan for the Connect Disneyland adventure on the Xbox 360.
Yep. And those are the ones that like get, mentioned, there's tons of small little things where Peter will just show up and crow or,
Yeah. Yeah.
say something to Tink, like we did a job last year where, Disneyland was having this, special Main Street celebration. And, I got to do Peter flying down Main Street and yelling at Tink. And, I went on a Disney cruise a couple of years ago for my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I was there with a friend of mine at dinner, and it was my birthday dinner. And Disney always does it so well with their resorts and their ships and everything.
Yeah.
But anyways, there's this dining room where the paintings on the wall are all of Disney characters, and by dessert, the characters all come alive, and there's this great technology that's happening where they're interacting with each other. And we're sitting there at dinner, and I hear me, and I'm like, hey, that's me. That's me doing Peter. And like I had completely forgotten it. I'd done it 6 months to a year beforehand, and a lot of times I don't really understand what it is we're doing, like where Peter fits into the thing. Like try explaining to an actor, okay, the restaurant's going to come alive. And people are going to start talking, and Peter says something to Mickey, and it doesn't really make any sense unless you're sitting in there and see it. But
Yeah.
it was awesome. It was my birthday, and the only person who knew why we were excited was my friend who I was with. We tried to tell the waiter or whatever, and nobody understood. Everybody thinks you're nuts.
They're just like, yeah, sure you're Peter, whatever, dude.
It's funny, it's the exact same response that I get from children, because
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who have little kids, and they always want to show the kid that I'm Peter, and kids never understand. Like
Yeah.
they just look at me like I'm crazy, and they're like, That's not Peter Pan.
He
You
doesn't look
can't
like Peter.
fly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. Well, I know you, mentioning some of the different things, like that's fantastic. You were on the ship and able to hear yourself. And, sometimes those things mean more to us than they do to the people around us. Cause like you say, they just don't quite understand it.
Right. Exactly.
But I know recently through our discussions, you had mentioned that you were getting hired for a job before this interview, just recently for a project. What was that all about, Blayne?
Yeah, we had to push this interview a week because
Yeah.
I got called in to do. And I'm not really, again, I'm not really absolute on the details, but it's for Disneyland Paris,
Wow.
and it's some kind of celebratory show that they're doing, and Peter gets to show up. Peter Pan is always American, and so no matter where in the world it is, whether it's Disneyland Tokyo or Paris or whatever, it always gets to be me, which makes me very happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know I should know this, but the original actor Bobby Driscoll, that was his name, wasn't it?
Yes, it is.
I
Yeah.
think I think you do him absolute justice because it is your own version of Peter, but it very much has that hearken to the original that everyone fell in love with. But it is your own version, that is still distinctly Blayne's voice of Peter, but it still carries that essence of the Disney magic, which I absolutely love in your voice, Blayne.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think you're right. Like, there are a lot of incredibly talented voice artists that I've worked with who, can do an impression that just blows your socks off.
Yeah.
I'm not really that. I don't really do that. But like, so I'm really happy that the quality that I bring to Peter seems to give the same gist,
Yeah.
as what Bobby did. So they're big shoes to fill.
Yeah, they are very big shoes to fill because those original Disney classics were, as we mentioned, Disney originals. So to be able to harken back to that is it's epic and it's iconic, really. So
Yeah. Again, like, I just can't say enough about how fortunate I feel. And, I just hope it goes on forever. I'll do it as long as they let me.
Well, I hope they do continue to let you do it for as long as possible. Blayne, on the show, one of the things I like to ask my special guests when they come on is we talk a lot about voiceover and the actors behind voiceover, and there are people that listen to this show who are interested in it becoming a career path for them. What kind of advice would you give to someone listening to the show who's a fan of voiceover and more specifically Peter Pan? What advice would you give to those listeners that would be interested in this as a career path?
Well, I think it's about, committing, when you're in the room, when you get the chance to audition and whatnot, you just have to commit to what it is 100%. It's very easy to get self-conscious and, feel silly about things. And that's the first step towards death. You need to embrace the fun and the reality of what you're doing, and like, I'm an actor, that's where I come to it from. So it's always about, believing and committing to the reality of the situation, whether, it's a little boy that can fly, or it's,
Yeah.
a talking animal or something.
Yeah.
It's like, going with that is full on. And as far as like getting those opportunities for those auditions, it's really about doing all of the prep work you possibly can and just being prepared. It's like, what's that? I'm going to butcher the old saying, but luck seems to, I can't even think of the word. What is it? You know it. If you're prepared, you tend to be more lucky, I guess is what it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I really ruined that.
No, it's okay. Well, besides advice, have there been other projects that you've done in voiceover? And if so, what kind of projects have you been involved with besides being the voice of Peter Pan?
Most of the voiceovers that I do have been, radio commercial spots, whether it's, a guy working the McDonald's line, the just a approachable spokesperson kind of things. Peter Pan is the only job that I've gotten that really has a character arc,
Yeah.
that really you get to sink your teeth into and act. A lot of voiceovers tend to be just, reading the copy and trying not to stumble over your words.
Absolutely. Something comes to mind, Blayne. With playing Peter Pan, would you say that the essence of who you are as a person kind of is a reflection of the character you portray in Peter?
Yeah, I would. I would. I don't think that that's a requirement by any means.
Yeah.
But I feel like this particular thing for me, it very much is me. And like have always loved Peter Pan. I obviously, I don't grow up very easily.
Yeah.
And I just like the childish joy that we can get from everyday life.
Yeah.
I'm very much a like live for the day, and I think that's what Peter does as well.
Yeah.
I hopefully, Peter has definitely some flaws, some lovable flaws, but flaws they are nonetheless. And hopefully I'm improving, getting better as I get older and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I relate way more to this character than I should as a grown man.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that in its essence and itself is part of why the character comes across so magical and special through your voice, Blayne, is because I feel a real essence of the character and yourself. I've always said that when it comes to acting, 50% of a character is what's, kind of structured by the people who are saying, this is who Peter Pan is. And everyone knows he's the fun-loving, carefree little boy that doesn't ever want to grow up. But there's always that 50% that an actor has to bring to it that has its own speciality through the person's voice and the actor that's bringing it to the table as well.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to really find that many characters, in the world that more people can describe, like that everybody, like, I don't think you have the same thing with, say, like a Cinderella, or, even a lot of superheroes. You've got Batman and Superman and, Peter Pan, I think fits right up in there because everybody has an idea about exactly who that kid is.
Yeah.
And that's part of the responsibility of playing the part is like sometimes I'll be called in for a job and, the people running it are Disney experts, obviously, but they're with all of the characters, and like you have to keep true to who I've learned who Peter is, and there will be times where we'll say, they'll have a line for me and I'm like, I just don't think he would say this. Can we rewrite it a little bit so it's a little less articulate?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everybody knows who Peter is, and that's so cool, and it's a responsibility as well.
Most definitely. Blayne, for anybody interested in reaching out to you to, speak to you, or maybe they're a fan of Peter Pan, or maybe they have questions about voiceover, do you have a website or social media or a way people can reach out to you?
I sure do. I mean, Twitter is always good, at Blayne Weaver, and it's BlayneWeaver, or BlayneWeaver.net is my website. But yeah, and I think there's a fan Facebook page too that I get emails from. So all the social media, I'm out there. So feel free to reach out.
Fantastic, Blayne. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, one of the questions I always ask is, what is your favorite cartoon or favorite cartoon character from growing up and why?
Well, I mean, I have to not say Peter Pan, right? Because that's I did when I was doing theater as a kid, my first big role was I got to play Michael in Peter Pan, the musical.
Oh, wow.
And that is a really cool experience for like a 7-8-year-old because I get to fly. So they hook you up in the harness and swing you around the stage. And like, it's just this experience that I had that like really stuck with me for a long time. And,
wow.
Doing a show 8 times a week, for several months, it really gets into your bones, and you start to really know what Peter Pan stands for, and the constant clash with Captain Hook. And I think that led me as an older kid to love Batman, and like Batman and the Joker and that constant. So if I had to choose a second, it would be Batman, but first will always be Peter.
Awesome. Well, I think that's fantastic because the character that you're able to play now is something that resonated with you as a child. It's fantastic. I mean, I don't think a lot of people get to live out their own dreams of a character that they grew up loving and getting to play it. That's fantastic.
No, it is a dream scenario for me.
Very much so. Well, the very last question I have for you today, Blayne, is what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm a filmmaker as well, and so I really like creating work that will continue on after I'm gone. I know that eventually, someone else will be doing the voice of Peter Pan because Peter Pan isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I really like being a part of that. But I would say that as far as any kind of legacy, it's really my work, as a filmmaker and as an actor. As a matter of fact, I have a new movie that's coming out on VOD and iTunes on March 7th called Cut to the Chase, which is a action thriller. It's not for the little kids, but if anybody wants to check out what else Peter Pan does in his free time, Cut to the Chase comes out March 7th and can be bought on VOD, iTunes, wherever.
Awesome. Fantastic, Blayne. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I really appreciate you diving into Peter Pan for me and for my audience, because he's definitely held a special place in my heart, and I know he does for millions, if not billions, of people around the world. So,
hey, man, great talking to you.
I couldn't agree more, Blayne. It was fantastic getting to chat with you. Thanks so much for your valuable time. Well, Blayne, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a closeout today as Peter Pan?
Absolutely. Well, I'm Blayne Weaver, and I'm happy to be doing Who Did That Voice, the voice of Peter Pan. And remember, all you need is faith, trust, and pixie dust.
Hey everyone, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Blayne Weaver, the voice of Peter Pan. You know, growing up as a young boy, Peter Pan was my absolute favorite. And speaking with Blayne today made me feel like a kid all over again. It kind of gave me that feeling that with a little faith, love, and pixie dust, anything is possible. I kind of feel like I got my feet off the ground and took a little flight today with Peter, and that was really inspirational to me. I hope this interview was fun for you, and if it was, please stop on by my Facebook or Twitter page by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Ann Ganguza, a voice actor, producer, and creator of VO Peeps. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.